Today, we actually would like to know about the Bangladesh and the United Kingdom are celebrating the 50 years anniversary of the diplomatic relations. Can you kindly highlight the various aspects of our relation? And I think it is growing.
Yeah,
So can you give brief highlight on the relations? Thank
sure.
you.
Well, what I would say is it's a relationship that is very deep and special. Uh, we were part of the creation of Bangladesh. There was very strong support in the UK in 1971. There was very strong public support, including big rallies in Trafalgar Square for Bangladeshi independence. And we were very pleased when Bangabadi was released by the Pakistanis that he chose to come to London first. He gave his first press conference as a free leader in Claridge's Hotel in London.
Yes.
And then he went to see our Prime Minister, Edward Heath, and then he was flown back by the British Royal Air Force to Bangladesh to take over the leadership of this newly liberated country. So
Yes.
we go right back to the beginning, and we have had a very strong and successful development partnership with Bangladesh over the 50 years that Bangladesh has been independent. We have been working alongside Bangladesh on the remarkable development success that Bangladesh has achieved in education, health, all sorts of the most important development metrics. And of course, we have a very strong British Bangladeshi community in the UK of 600,000 people, and it's an increasingly visible and confident part of the community in the UK. So we very much welcome that, and that gives a very strong basis to our relationship. And I think what we're seeing now is that a relationship that is really, as Bangladesh graduates from LDC status in 2026, I think we're seeing the relationship take on a slightly new form, where we'll be focused less on the sort of deep-seated development issues and more on trade, on defence, on security, on culture, and of course we'll be continuing to build on the very deep relationship that we have on both cricket and on curry, which are important parts of the partnership. So I think it's a really significant and important relationship, and it's one that I really see deepening and growing in the next 50 years, just as it has in the last 50 years.
Thank you very much. What is your observation about the progress and the development of Bangladesh during the last 50 years after the independence of Bangladesh?
Well, I think it's been an incredible success story. I mean, you look at Bangladesh that was devastated first of all by the cyclone in 1970, then by the war in 1971, and I think the achievement of the Bangladeshi people over the last 50 years has been remarkable, to get from that very difficult start to the point where Bangladesh is expected to graduate from LDC status in 2026. And as I said, accompanied by some of the most remarkable underlying development statistics anywhere in the world. You know, it's a real example of how government and civil society can work together to bring down infant mortality, bring down maternal mortality, improve education, improve vaccination rates. You know, and a lot of the really important developmental indicators. Bangladesh is a global example.
Bangladesh enjoys duty and quota-free access in European Union market. After Brexit, how UK will provide similar access for Bangladeshi products?
Well, we are, of course, Brexit happened more than 2 years ago, and we completed our transition arrangements more than a year ago. And so Bangladesh is now, we are offering the same access to our market as the EU. And what we've said is that that access will continue for 3 years after graduation. So that quota-free, duty-free access will continue until 2029. And I don't know what will happen then, no decision has been taken, but it does mean that for the next 7 years, Bangladeshi companies will continue to enjoy the same access to our market as they have before.
Okay. Bangladesh is formulating a national smooth transition strategy to make the graduation of Bangladesh from LDC group to the developing one smoother. How UK can contribute for smooth graduation of Bangladesh?
Well, I think what we're doing is I think the key thing for Bangladesh as it goes through the next period is going to be how the country can flourish in a way which draws in private investment, because if you look at where the capital, the finance that is going to be needed to keep the economy growing is going to come from, it's going to need to come from the private sector and from international investment. And the key to that is making sure that there are institutions in Bangladesh in which international investors feel confident. So we are working with the government and with partners like the IFC and the World Bank to try to ensure that the Bangladesh economy is one that is attractive and comfortable as an environment for foreign investors. And I think it's fair to say there is some way to go. At the moment, the World Bank has a league table, which it's now discontinued, but the most recent result showed Bangladesh at 168th in the world ease of doing business rankings. And I think there are plenty of things that we can see with our partners in the Bangladesh government, which could be done that would to improve the nature of Bangladesh for international investors. And we were very pleased that the government of Bangladesh and BIDA, the Bangladesh Investment Development Authority, chose the UK as a place for a major roadshow last year. So the Honourable Prime Minister, when she was in the UK in November, took part in one of those roadshows. And the UK in London we have some of the biggest, deepest capital markets in the world.
Yes.
And there is a lot of interest in Bangladesh. And I think in order to convert that interest into actual investment, what is needed is some consistent work to improve the business environment here in Bangladesh. And then I think the remarkable progress that's been made with an economy growing at 6 to 8% a year for the last 2 decades, really, with only a brief interruption for COVID. But I think that progress can be sustained if private capital can be drawn in.
Particularly the employment opportunity. What is your plan to cooperate in fighting COVID and post-COVID recovery? Do you see more British investment in Bangladesh in the future? What are the problems and prospects for British investment in Bangladesh?
Well, we're already very big investors in Bangladesh. British companies, if you look at it cumulatively, British companies are the second largest investors in Bangladesh. And so there are some very big British names operating here, HSBC, Standard Chartered, Unilever, and there are smaller companies as well. So there is a very active trade and investment relationship. What I've been keen to do as High Commissioner is to try to encourage new companies to look at the opportunities in Bangladesh. And there are some significant names in the UK who are looking at the market. And I think it's fair to say that it would be easier to do that if we can demonstrate together that the sort of issues I talked about in terms of ease of doing business are being tackled effectively.
In particularly, what are the issues in doing business? What are the major issues you are facing the problems for investment class?
Well, what investors need to feel is that they can come here, they can put their money to work, they can invest in a way which doesn't involve them in a huge amount of process and bureaucracy, and that they can, as I said, they can make investments in a way that suits their commercial timescales, supports their commercial interests, that they can make honest profits here, that they can remit those profits back home, and that if they have an issue, then they can have confidence in the legal system to resolve those issues in a fair and equitable way. And I think if you look at all of those things, there is scope for some improvement. And as I said, that relates to the overall heading of ease of doing business. And we are working with the government and with partners in the international financial institutions to bring about some improvements in that area.
Right. Bangladesh and UK are working together to face the challenges of climate change.
Yeah.
Bangladesh requires more funds to reduce the effect of global warming. Do you have any plan to increase the funding?
Yes, we do. We announced at COP26 in Glasgow a new UK-Bangladesh Climate and Environment Partnership, which will spend £120 million over the next 6 years here. And that will focus on a variety of things, including transition to clean energy, transition to clean vehicles, adaptation, working with the new Global Centre for Adaptation office here, and the handling of solid waste management in particular, which is obviously a major issue in the urban environment here in Bangladesh. So it's a very active program, and I'm very excited that we're now launching it.
Bangladesh is facing serious consequences due to the Rohingya crisis. Despite support from the international community, there is no result in sustainable repatriation of Rohingyas. Do you have any plan to put more pressure on Myanmar to solve the problem?
Well, we are putting as much pressure as we can on Myanmar. We've imposed sanctions on the leaders of the military junta in Myanmar. We consistently raised the issue in the United Nations Security Council, where we're what's called the penholder.
Sorry.
We're the penholder, so we are the lead on this issue in the UN. We very much welcome the work that's being done to take Myanmar in front of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. So across the board, we are doing what we can to put pressure on Myanmar to make sure that this crisis, amidst all the other crises that are happening in the world, we're working hard to try to ensure that the crisis in Myanmar and the Rohingya crisis is not forgotten, because 1 million people were chased out of their homes in Rakhine nearly 5 years ago, and we absolutely think the right thing for those people is to return to their homes in Rakhine as soon as they can do so in a way which is safe, dignified, and voluntary. So we want them to go home. They want to go home. Nobody wants to go to a refugee camp. I've visited the camps on many occasions. All the Rohingyas I've spoken to are very clear that they see their future back home in Myanmar. But clearly the situation in Myanmar doesn't currently allow them to return. And while that's the case, then we are working hard with our partners in the government of Bangladesh to make sure that, and with the international agencies, particularly with the United Nations, to make sure that that Rohingya community is supported while it's here in Bangladesh. And it's very important, I think, for everybody living in these difficult conditions to be supported in a way which gives them a sense of purpose. And for the adults, that means giving them the ability to earn a living and the ability to be volunteers in the camp environment, to keep the camps clean and habitable. And for the children, that means education. And that is really important, that children have the ability to learn in the Myanmar language so that they can return to Myanmar and make their lives as citizens of Myanmar when they return.
Do you think that the crisis in Ukraine for war, the refugee crisis is there, and maybe more than 2 million people are now in refugees in the surrounding countries of Ukraine, like Poland or other countries? Do you think the Rohingya donation or the donors' aid from the donors for the Rohingyas will be shrinking because of the Ukraine crisis, as we have seen in the crisis similar in the Afghanistan? And that time we were worried about the Rohingyas' future because people are living in the Cox's Bazar camps and also the Bhasanchar. So they need huge foreign donation.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously, brutal, unprovoked Russian aggression in Ukraine, the illegal war that Russia has launched against Ukraine, is obviously putting pressure on humanitarian funding everywhere. And you're absolutely right that there are already major crises in Syria, Yemen, Tigray in Ethiopia, and Afghanistan. And the Ukraine crisis, which is completely a result of Russian aggression, obviously creates an enormous new crisis. And inevitably that is going to put pressure on the funds for Myanmar. But we are very clear that Myanmar has created a refugee crisis in Bangladesh as well. And it's very important that we continue to support the Rohingyas in Bangladesh, just as we respond to these other crises as well. So we will continue to do that. But clearly it does put pressure on refugee and humanitarian funding everywhere in the world. It's a sad fact that this new act of aggression, this completely unprovoked, unnecessary, senseless war that the Russians have launched against their neighbour, clearly makes all sorts of situations around the world, including humanitarian funding, more difficult.
So the Western diplomat had played active role in Bangladesh before the general election in the past, and Bangladesh government often sees it as an interference. Do you have preparations for similar activities ahead of the next general elections? How you can help Bangladesh to hold free, fair and credible elections? Do you think government initiative to new law to, that was previous. So what do you think about the election commission just formed and the new election? How do you observation?
Well, I think it's for Bangladesh to organise its elections. This is clearly something that there's plenty of capacity in Bangladesh to organise elections, and that's the right thing to happen. What I would say is that as friends of Bangladesh, for the reasons that we were discussing earlier, it would be easier for foreign friends to have a really productive and warm relationship with Bangladesh if it's clear that Bangladesh is a functioning democracy, and the most basic democratic test, if you like, is are the elections credible, free and fair. So we will be we'll be looking with interest, watching with interest at how the elections, presumably at the end of next year, are conducted, and we very much hope that they will take place in a way that is free, fair and credible.
Bangladesh government often complains the Western approach about the quality of democracy, human rights, and the governance in Bangladesh. What do you say? Will you say anything regarding the controversy about the rape and the rape after US sanctions?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that there is evidence which has been circulating in the international community about extrajudicial killing by organs of the Bangladeshi state, and obviously we view that with concern in Bangladesh just as we would anywhere. So clearly, anything like that is to be avoided. And what I would note is that there is an excellent constitution in Bangladesh. The 1972 constitution provides very clear provision for democracy, for human rights, for freedom of speech, and we very much welcome it when life and politics in Bangladesh is conducted in a way that supports the values that are set out very clearly in that constitution. And clearly, there are credible reports of human rights abuse, and that causes us concern.
Ajay, do you have any discussion with the government of Bangladesh about BNP's acting chairman Tariq Rahman's stay in UK? There are some allegations about spreading hate speeches from UK. What is your response?
Well, anyone who commits hate speech in the UK, anyone who crosses that legal threshold can be prosecuted. And I don't think we have any evidence at the moment, or at least no evidence has been produced of anything that would qualify within that would cross the legal thresholds. So it's not for me to judge whether that threshold has been crossed, but the judgment of our law enforcement in the UK is that it has not. And if it was, then clearly action would be taken.
Okay. There are serious concerns over some part of on the Digital Security Act. Particularly, we have the worry as the media people whether it will be used against us sometimes, some part, not the whole Digital Security Act. It may curb the freedom of expression. We have the concern. What is your opinion?
Well, I think freedom of speech and freedom of the media is very important. I mean, any functioning democracy needs the ability of the media to investigate, to call out, to describe the situation as it sees it. And anything that puts the media under pressure is clearly potentially of concern. And I think we know that our friends in the media have concerns about the Digital Security Act. I've discussed with other heads of mission. I've discussed these concerns in detail in the past with the Law Minister, with the Honourable Law Minister. We've had good discussions about that. And what I note is that there is work going on now involving the United Nations to try and address some of the concerns that have been raised about the Digital Security Act, and I very much welcome that work. I think that's a very helpful thing.
What is your future plan to boost people-to-people contact between our two countries? There is a complaint as the British visa decision coming from Delhi office. Do you have any plan to come shift it is in Dhaka?
What I would say is, I mean, it is true that the visas are processed in India, but they are processed by British, UK-based entry clearance officers. So the decisions are made by British officials, and it doesn't make any difference to the processing whether the British officials are sitting in Dhaka, sitting in Delhi, or indeed, as I think they will be in the future, sitting increasingly in the UK. So the decisions are the same. The decisions are based on evidence, and they're taken by UK staff. And one of our objectives in the move that we made of our visa processing to Delhi was to keep the costs down. Under our system, the costs of visas have to be recovered from the applicants. So this was a way of making visas cheaper, or keeping visas cheaper.
Okay. how Bangladesh and UK can cooperate each other in the regional and international areas, including countering terrorism, elevating poverty, education, greater flows of trade and investment, etc., in the region and beyond.
Well, I think we have a very strong relationship on trade. We're Bangladesh's third largest export market, so we have a very strong relationship. As we were discussing, the preferential access that Bangladeshi goods have to the UK market is going to be sustained for at least the next 7 years. And I very much hope we can build a more diverse trading relationship. I think it would be very good if we could be trading more with each other. Clearly, Bangladeshi exports consist largely of ready-made garments, but there is a lot of interest in the other things that are made in Bangladesh. So I think that is going well. What I'm very keen to do is to have more British exports to Bangladesh. At the moment, the relationship is heavily weighted in Bangladesh's favour, which is fine because Bangladesh is very competitive. But I'm very keen, as Bangladesh becomes more prosperous, for more high-value UK goods and services to be processed here to be available here in Bangladesh. So I think there is a real opportunity, particularly for services. So UK education, financial services, healthcare. These are things where the UK is a world-leading producer. And I think it would be very good to see the Bangladesh market open up more to make those very good UK services available here in Bangladesh. And a particular example I would give is universities. So British universities, we know of around a dozen British universities who are very interested in Bangladesh and would like to come here. And at the moment, they haven't been able to get the necessary approvals from the government and from the University Grants Commission. But I very much hope they will get that approval because they are able to offer a world-leading university education. And
what are the problems to setting the campus? No?
We haven't been able to get the approvals that are needed from the government and from the University Grants Commission.
The universities wanted to set up the campus here?
They want to set up partnerships and operations here in Bangladesh, and it's a model that has worked very
How many universities?
Around a dozen are interested.
Okay.
And it's a model that's worked really well in Malaysia, in Sri Lanka, and other countries in the region. And those universities, those British universities, look at the scale of the opportunity in Bangladesh. They see that there are over 40 million children in school here. They think those young people would really benefit from a UK university education. And I think Bangladesh would benefit as well because as Bangladesh
quality education
is one of the keys to sustained growth, particularly for a middle-income country. And I think the more Bangladesh can open up those opportunities for world-leading UK university education in Bangladesh to young Bangladeshis, the better it is for the young Bangladeshis who benefit, but also the better it is for the...
But I think the concern came from the private universities here. Maybe they are not interested because they have apprehension that they will lose their revenue or income for their own. But there will be a partnership.
Well, there's all sorts of possibilities, but at the moment we haven't got the permission to look at what is possible. I think I recognise what you're saying, but the private universities clearly have their own interests. And I would argue that the interests of young people in Bangladesh is to have access to the widest range of competitive, world-class university education that they can. And allowing one group of universities in Bangladesh to block access by competitors probably doesn't benefit young people here in Bangladesh. So it may be, if it is as you describe,
the modern education,
argue with that, then that is not to the benefit of young people here in Bangladesh.
That is the question because of the modern viewpoint. And one of the final question is on the issue of Russia and Ukraine war. It looks like a very big misery for the people of across the world. And what we are looking, the Russian forces are inside the Kiev and also the port city of Odessa, and everywhere they are started the aggression. At the same time, the United States and its NATO partners are imposing the sanctions, also supplying the arms to the president of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky. It looks like that the war is spreading across the beyond Ukraine or beyond Russia, it looks like the starting point of the Third World War. Do you think that it could be a bigger world war which will affect everywhere, as the Bangladesh has already affected because of the disconnected of the trade between Bangladesh and Ukraine at this moment, because of the port of Odessa has disconnected and the Black Sea is disconnected from Ukraine.
Yeah.
So what do you think the future? Is there possibility of a third world war?
Well, I hope there isn't going to be a third world war. At NATO and our partners in NATO, we're being very careful not to allow that to happen. But I think if we step back from this, this is an appalling act of aggression. This is an unprovoked act of illegal aggression by Russia against one of its neighbours. I mean, it is completely in breach of the UN Charter, of the United Nations Charter, of international law, of all the norms of the way that countries treat each other. And it's an appalling and shocking event. I mean, it's a really horrific event, and we can already see it's causing massive civilian suffering in Ukraine. It's caused 2 million people to leave Ukraine. It's killing thousands of civilians. And the Russian army appears to be behaving with a mixture of incompetence, because they clearly are not doing very well in the military struggle, and they're responding to that with increasingly brutal tactics against civilians, including bombing hospitals, bombing schools. So it's an appalling situation, which appears to be leading very directly to war crimes being committed. So the situation is, it's appalling that Russia created this situation. The way in which their brutal and incompetent military is carrying it forward is resulting in war crimes. So that is appalling. But there are two other things, I should say, which I think directly affect everyone in the world. The first is that this is a direct assault on the international rule of law. So the only way that we as human beings can live in the world together is if countries respect each other's right to exist. And Russia is clearly completely denying Ukraine the right to exist. So that is an appalling assault on the rule of law and the rules-based international system everywhere. And the second thing is, it's affecting every person in the world, because this sort of massively disruptive and destructive behaviour is leading to worldwide disruption in the energy market. So we're seeing fuel prices up, we're seeing food prices up. Ukraine is normally a very important producer of wheat. That's obviously not going to be available this year. It's disrupted the market for edible oils, and it's disrupted the wider commodity prices. So everybody, at a time when the world is trying to recover together from COVID, Russia's illegal, unprovoked aggression has completely disrupted, has added a much greater degree of disruption and destruction to the world economy. So it's an appalling act of aggression. It's the worst aggression we've seen in Europe since 1945. And it, as I said, has an impact on everyone in the world, because it's not the way we can live together as human beings, and it has had a hugely disruptive effect on the world economy. So the best thing Russia can do is immediately to halt its illegal, unprovoked action in Ukraine, withdraw its forces, and then not put them back again.
Regarding the Bangladesh position on the Ukrainian situation, Ukraine-Russia war, that Bangladesh is actually in their dilemma. One thing, the ethical point of view, because we are a small country, everybody's small country, big country phenomena, that we cannot support the big countries' neighboring aggression on the neighbors. We cannot support in the ethical point of view. At the same time, the economic interest, like Russia have the 13 billion investment on the Rupur power project, and we have the electricity project with Russia, and we have many other trade, $3 billion trade with Russia. So country is actually dilemma, and so that you have seen the position. The Bangladesh was abstained on the General Assembly resolutions, but at the same time in the statement Bangladesh said we do not support the war, we actually support the diplomatic solution of any crisis. So did you discuss with Bangladesh regarding these issues from UK or NATO?
Yes, we discussed. I discussed.
Well, what you have said?
Well, I had hoped that Bangladesh was going to support the resolution. I think there's a very strong moral case. I mean, I think for any country, and particularly for countries that do so much to support the international rule of law, as Bangladesh does with its contribution to UN peacekeeping, I had hoped that Bangladesh was going to support international rule of law by voting in favour of the resolution. I understand the reasons why Bangladesh did not do that. I hope that in future resolutions, and I'm sure there will be other opportunities because this crisis is clearly going to.
Maybe
take a
there
long
will
time
be
to
a
resolve.
proposal for humanitarian access to Ukraine.
Or I hope there will
maybe
be, I'm sure there will be opportunities,
resolution.
other opportunities for Bangladesh to show its condemnation of Russia's illegal, unprovoked aggression. So, I would hope that next time Bangladesh will perhaps join us. I would note that 141 countries joined
Right.
the UN General Assembly.
But including India and other 35
Yes.
countries were abstained
Yes,
because
but
of the.
141
Yeah, that's right. I think
joined. Only 4 countries joined Russia.
that's right.
Syria, Eritrea, and North Korea, and Syria joined Russia. So Russia is very isolated. Russia has no friends and supporters. I understand that some countries have abstained, but the vast majority of countries in the world
Right.
condemned absolutely this appalling act of Russian aggression.
Did you watching the evacuation, Bangladeshi's evacuations, including a dead body,
Yes.
maybe already arrived in Dhaka?
I express deep condolences to the family of the engineer from the Bangladesh Sridhara, I think the ship was called, who was killed. It's tragic. It's a reminder that the consequences of this illegal, unprovoked war that Russia has launched are felt everywhere in the world, and it's extremely tragic for the engineer and his family. And obviously, I was glad that most Bangladeshis appear to have been able to leave Ukraine safely. But it's just a reminder of the scale of the crisis that Russia has provoked.
And the final words, actually we are on the time for wrap up, and what you will say the final words about Bangladesh-UK relation, future directions, what you are thinking, future, what do you want to see in the future, and what are the activities, whether any big high-level visit from UK to Bangladesh,
Yeah.
Bangladesh to.
Well, I think it's a really important
The final
partnership for both sides, and I think what we're seeing is it developing. As I said, it's been a really important and strong partnership over the last 50 years, and I'm really pleased to see the different ways in which it's expanding, developing, growing, and I think it's in a really good place for the next 50 years of Sona Bangla.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.